can move on to item 5, reading and approval of minutes from the previous meeting. We have
You need a motion?
a motion to adopt the minutes of the Monday, December 16th meeting of the City IDA.
I so move. Christina? Second.
Ms. Amato moves to adopt the minutes of the December 16th meeting. Ms. Church seconds. Roll call.
For the, Ali Church. Aye. Michael Nuffel.
Aye.
Sean Powell. Greg Nato.
Aye.
Yamato.
Aye.
Thanks.
Just one point, it says on here November 18th, this is just a typo.
Yes. Pointed out to me.
December 16th, it says to approve the meeting, reading and approval.
Well, because at the December meeting, we approved the November minutes.
Okay, great. Item 6, report of the treasurer. The treasurer is not present this evening. I believe we have Ms. Amato to deliver the report of the treasurer.
Sure do. Okay. This is the IDA Treasurer's Report, January 22nd, 2025. For December, our operating account ending in 2847, opening balance as of December 1st at $597,046.93. Total deposits of $14,941.32. And total disbursements of $24,505.89, for a closing balance of $587,482.36. The payroll account ending in 8243 had an opening balance December 1st of $36,840.20, and a closing balance of $26,841.31. The application funds account ending in 2855 had an opening and closing balance of the same amount of $14,151.44. The lesser tenant account ending in 2863 had an opening balance of $2,509.56, with interest accrued and a closing balance of $2,516.79. Labor monitoring account ending in 7072 had an opening and closing account balance of the same $15,014.79. The money market account ending in 2871 had an opening balance of $1,280,417.99, with an accrual of interest for a closing balance of $1,284,108.81. Newburgh South Logistics Center account ending in 6521 had an opening balance of $45.59, deposits of $2,172.62, and disbursements of $2,170, for a closing balance of $48.21. The Provident Bank account ending in 4346 had a 0 opening and closing balance, and the Provident Bank account ending in 5683 had an opening balance of $4,258,821.87, and the same closing balance.
Also, may I just note, we noticed the typo under the Newburgh South Logistics Center. It says 2025. We'll make sure that says 2024.
20. Oh, yeah.
December 5th.
Yeah, December. Yes, noted. So I need 2 resolutions, one to approve the treasurer's report and one to pay the bills.
I move to approve the treasurer's report.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained? Okay,
Make a motion to pay the bills.
Thank you, Ally.
I'll second.
You want to do it? You can, sorry, go
Just
ahead.
one minute.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining?
I think we can move on to item 7, the chairman's report. My report will be brief. As we'll get to later on in the agenda, I can report that ongoing litigation with M&T Bank regarding the Broadway Armory will be brought to a close with the approval of a resolution this evening. So I just really want to publicly thank all of the board members and agency staff, Sheriff Vickers, Bob McLaughlin, our agency general counsel, and Kelly Pressler, who is not in attendance this evening, for a long process that they were able to bring to a close. And, you know, I just kind of caught the alley-oop at the end, but this was really a long process that required diligent pursuit of resolution, and just really earnest thank you to Kelly and Bob and Cher and the board members for accomplishing this. I'll also mention that the agency is undertaking several transparency measures to improve the overall transparency of the agency operations. You notice public hearings this evening were held in public with the board in a room that ostensibly would have accommodated a larger crowd. I encourage residents that are affected by tax abatements and incentive packages that the IDA considers to show up to these public hearings and voice your opinions. We are live streaming our meetings from this point forward, rather than recording and posting them at a later date. So I think these are some very positive steps forward for the agency. And that concludes the chairman's report. We can move to item 8, council's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to echo what you said, congratulations to the board on the Armory, to Cher, and especially to Kelly, who obviously did a great job. Very quickly, the board asked at the last meeting if MRB's contract could be, if the UTEP session could be wrapped into the contract. We reviewed the contract, discussed it with MRB. We believe that it is, and it is covered. There was a suggestion by MRB that they would deduct portions of the scope of work from the contract, and I directed that back to the to Cher as the executive director to work it out with them. But the bottom line is, it can be covered under that contract. I brought at the last meeting Murphy's Ditch, which is that easement at the Newburgh Plaza. There was a question of whether or not it could just be terminated. It can be terminated. We see problems with that, though. Both practically, how do you cut off the easement in a public parking lot and address life safety issues? I don't think the IDA has a couple of dozen of Jersey barriers that are sitting around that can be moved easily. And frankly, the maps for where that easement actually is, you'd have to get a surveyor out and actually confirm. So I think there's a lot of problems with doing that. The agreement does provide for the filing of a lien. We'd have to start an action, get a lien. The way the agreement is written, it's a little weird. It almost sounds like an equitable lien, which, as Mike knows, is kind of hard to enforce once it's there. And even if we were to get the lien, it's just going to sit there for 60 years until the property is sold. I'm not sure what it gets. So we come back to the board to consider, not at this meeting, but maybe at the next meeting, the commencement of litigation against the developer with maybe a copy to the tenants saying that, you failed to pay the amount due under the easement agreement. It's $55,000, it's not insignificant. All they have submitted is a ledger that says, we haven't paid the 55 grand. So it's kind of, their position's kind of nonsensical. So, we can talk about that further at the next meeting. Update on Scobie Drive, we did receive, and the IDA did receive, the executive director, a letter from DEC with comments that they made on their landfill, their draft landfill Sawyer gas investigation work plan. Those comments need to be incorporated into the plan within 30 days. We understand that the applicant is doing that, so that appears to be moving forward. Brookfield, we expect to close on that now after the resolution that you'll consider tonight. Sometime in February, they've indicated they want to close in February. I did have a quick conversation with the attorney for the hotel project, and they are moving forward with their reapplication to their lenders for a new financing. They expect to have that by the end of this quarter, so potentially we can revise those closing documents at some point in the second quarter and get that moving for the city. And then we worked on the cell tower amendments, which is subject of a resolution, and we'll talk about that when that is brought forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We can move to item 9, Executive Director's Report.
Yeah, so just an update of what we have going on in the office. It's this time of the year where we submit or start getting ready for our annual reports, which is called Paris. And I've added Mike and I think maybe Vicky as some of the contacts for the IDA, so you will get emails just as reminders, but I also always get the same emails that you get. But this is the time of year that we start sending out all of the letters to our projects, our trustees, we have bonds with, and we basically, use some of that information for the audit. The audit has been scheduled for the week of February 10th, and we've already, started communicating with them and submitting documents for that. The Audit Finance Committee would need to meet before the March 17th meeting to review the audit that we'll hopefully have by that time for board approval at that March 17th meeting. And the reason is because March 31st is when those reports are due, and so it's a really tight timeline with that. But how quickly we get back the audit depends on if there's any questions or anything from the auditor that prevents it from being given into us in a timely manner. We have the RFP for the structural engineer still out. I've gotten many emails and phone calls and visits for that. It closes next week, so hopefully by the February board meeting, you'll have somebody to choose from. What else? Yep, as you can also notice, we have someone here that is reporting the board meeting for us, Sean Strong from Fanatics. We did follow our procurement policy and request quotes from 3 vendors, and he was in line with our procurement policy, and that's why he's here today, and hopefully will continue to be so for the following board meetings continuing forward. There is the annual New York State Economic Development Conference, which will be the same week as the audit, so I cannot attend. But if that is something that anybody wants to go to in Albany, please let me know, because it is a paid-for event, and unfortunately you don't get credits for going, so it would purely be for your interest in what's happening in the economic development world in New York State. And then, other than that, the office has been preparing for the public hearings next month. Some of them which are subject to your vote for consideration tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Cher. We can move to item 10, new business. We have 4 resolutions tonight to consider. We'll start with resolution number 2025-01-22-01, amendment to approving resolution IV5 Newburgh South Logistics Center, LLC.
So this is an amendment to a resolution that was passed back in November, where you approved the warehouse project. That resolution contained a placeholder for the cost of the labor monitor not to exceed $25,000. The labor monitor submitted their proposal of the price, and it came in at 36,000. So this amendment is simply to amend that placeholder of 25 to not to exceed 40,000 in order for us to be able to close next month.
You spoke with the applicant about this?
Yes, they're fine.
And they're fine with
They're fine.
Do we believe this is based on the nature of the project, or these are the prices that we should see going forward?
I think it's a combination of both. I think that's a great question. I think the one that I used as the placeholder was from 2022, and I think costs have increased, and I think this project as a warehouse is slightly different than anything else, so.
May I have a motion to approve resolution number 2025-01-22-01?
I so move. Christina?
Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ally Church. Roll
Roll
call.
call.
Mike Neppel,
Aye.
Ally Church,
Aye.
Vicky Anna is absent, Gregory Nato,
Aye.
Christina Mano,
Yes.
and Sean Nakam.
Thank you.
And I would just add to your question, it's a cost paid by the applicant. Okay, they deposit money in escrow with the agency, and then bills are just paid for that, yes.
Thank you. Moving on to resolution number 2025-01-22-02, consideration of a public hearing for the Shaw Building LP.
We can invite Jake to come back up and give a presentation of his findings, followed by a presentation from Connor on the analysis that we did.
Great. While this gets loaded, thank you guys for having me tonight. Just want to say I appreciate your guys' time and also, more importantly, the service that you guys do for the city of Newburgh. These projects don't happen without incentives like this, and I've seen how, at least over the last 5 years that I've been spending time here, really important projects have gotten the support from you guys that now exist that otherwise wouldn't have. And so the impact is meaningful, and I just want to say I appreciate it because this is, you guys, whatever night it is, Wednesday night, so thank you for spending the time. I'm here to talk to you guys about the shop building, which is a development project that is happening in the city of Newburgh. This project is the second phase of a two-phase development that was initiated in 2020 when myself and some other partners, including Andrew, purchased the Foundry, which is an adaptive reuse project that you guys are familiar with. During that time that we were under contract and had not yet closed on that, I assembled another group of partners with some overlap to the Foundry to go and purchase the shop building, which was directly across the street, with the intention of having that be a second phase redevelopment with a vision towards creating a more meaningful and impactful change to this very specific section of Newburgh that is very important. It's been incredible to see now the opportunity we have with even some additional projects like One Lafayette, with what Kearney's doing, and also what Philippe proposed at 104 Washington, and then even further up the block on South Williams with the school. There's really a lot of momentum for meaningful sites to come alive, and we see the shop building as being one of the critical pieces at being a part of a revitalization effort for this core part of the city of Newburgh. The project is two components. There's the existing building, which is already on site. That's 25,000 square feet. And then there'll be a new ground up development project all on the same parcel. So one project that is currently a just some vacant land on the site. So there's some row houses that already exist. There's a hill, then there's some more row houses. We're going to fill that in, call it a gap tooth. And then, you know, you can see the sides of the foundry across the street. So, yeah, let's jump in. And I'll say, you know, feel free to ask questions along the way. If I don't know what the rules are, sometimes there's rules about that, but I'm okay with it if you guys have things. Just to orient us, you know, the building is here. It's right at the corner of Jones and South Williams, and you have the foundry across the street. I took this as a screenshot from my Google Maps, so that's why we have a nice little heart for Cafe Little Treasure, because I don't ever want to forget it when I come here. The hardest part about going there is deciding if you are going to get the hamburger or the hot beef sandwich, because they're both so good, and so I just don't know which one to get. So that's my tip of the day, and one community benefit. It's going to be, this project is going to be a mixed-use development. Let's see. We'll point something else out about the area. I think what we have an opportunity to do is help bridge Liberty Street with the already established waterfront, that jurisdiction that Newburgh's very well known for outside of Newburgh. I think that there's, you know, more and more interest coming into Newburgh for what's happening on Liberty Street, and if there's more connectivity between Liberty Street and the waterfront with walkable retail, walkable streets, and fully developed sites that don't look like, you know, unapproachable warehouse buildings, and more like a restaurant, cafe, art studios, etc., and people walking there because they live there, then that will create just a more approachable atmosphere for traversing Liberty Street to the waterfront. And so we have, you know, this project is probably, you know, one of the most critical pieces of that objective. When the project is done, it will have a mix of residential, commercial space, a gym, a restaurant, and some additional commercial stalls. The residential is going to be 53 housing units, and that's, of those, 10% is going to be affordable. We're not getting any affordable subsidies or incentives from any programs because the project is too small to be eligible for something like affordable tax credits or low-income tax credits, or even for HCR's small building program. You have to do 100% of the building as affordable, or otherwise you can't participate in it. So our inclusion of any affordable housing is from a desire to see mixed income projects as a part of Newburgh's future. And so we designated that 5 of the units will be affordable at 80% of AMI. And I think that that's a good precedence for developers to opt in to doing something like making some units inclusionary if you can. So we could do it here, and that's, you know, but that was part of the intent of including any affordable housing. We were also going to subsidize one of the commercial stalls. So of those, we'll have 8. This picture shows it better. So we're going to have 8 stalls along Jones Street, which will be a hybrid of artist studios, which can also be retail. So from talking to a couple different folks who create in this city, they've said, hey, you know, we have space where we can create. We also need space where we could sell. And so they can opt into having people walk into their studio to actually purchase some of their wares. It's a good amenity for the city because it creates, you know, people like to go and check out what's being made here and locally and who's creating. And I think that there is an emerging and existing creator class here that should be celebrated. And so this is an opportunity to do that and help them also sell their goods and make some money. We're going to have a cafe, restaurant, what is right now the loading docks, right on South William Street. And so that's basically a half block or a block and a half from Liberty Street. And you can see the loading docks from Liberty Street. And so it's an opportunity to just create like a visual draw, and in that way, like, create a great experience for what will be the residents living here at the Foundry, and then also at the Kearney project to have somewhere to grab a bite or a coffee or something as they want to start their day. There's right now nothing kind of in that sector that is servicing that area, and so would be an opportunity to do that. And we'll also have a small gym that will be available to residents of the building and residents of the city. So we talked about the residential units. This is a 4-story with mezzanine building. Top floors should have some views of the Hudson River. And yeah, it's going to be 34 residential units. All the affordable units will be in this building. This is what the building looks like now. It's a beautiful historic building, but you can see that all the ground floor windows and some of the second-story windows have been bricked up and cinder blocked, and I don't think that that's the most inviting experience for anybody who's not storing boxes or whatever inside the space. So the opportunity is to drastically upgrade the streetscape for the city, and also to restore the building to what it looked like in the 1880s when it was built. We'll have some pictures of that, and the intention is to use historic tax credits, so whatever we end up building will be in line with SHPO, MPS criteria around what history was, and be in line with that. So I think we have an opportunity to make something really beautiful here that preserves a significant building in our city. This is a view kind of from the Liberty Street area facing the property. Again, right now, this is not an inviting building. There's even probably a little more graffiti on it and maybe a little trash, but we're gonna get it all taken care of. This is a view from the parking lot. So the back of the new building will be kind of here, and we'll have this interior courtyard that will be significantly upgraded. Again, we're gonna open up that whole section of the building that's currently bricked up on the ground level, so that it is a much more accessible and vibrant experience. This is what it looks like inside at the moment. So far from like a highest and best use for the potential of what we're talking about creating versus what's happening here now is, not really adding much to the city, and the condition of the building needs to be improved, and this is the kind of development that will allow us to have a business plan to actually invest in the building. And so we need your guys' support to make that happen. A couple more pictures. This is what it used to look like back in the 1880s when it was built. The structure was a Shaw and Sons hardware and building material manufacturing site. So they actually made beams. It was kind of like a design build center, somewhat like a Home Depot of the day, where they would actually manufacture things like the large timber beams that would go into the structures of other buildings. They had architects who worked here who you could hire to design and then build, and materials would get refined here. And so this building contributed to the construction of many other buildings, not just in Newburgh, but also throughout the Hudson Valley.
Before you go off that, can you orient us to where's Washington's headquarters from here?
So this is the river, so that's east. Washington's headquarters is 2 big plots north. So the Foundry is 1 plot north, and then Washington headquarters on the other side.
I see, thank you.
Great. And so you could see historically, this building used to be open at the ground level, obviously, and we intend to restore it to that. We'll probably also write Shaw on the chimney again. That'll be cute. Let's talk about some opportunities, and we've touched on most of these. Housing's important in the city of Newburgh, critical. I think we got to do a do everything approach here. We need more affordable, we need more market, we need more mixed income. This is an opportunity for a mostly market rate housing project. We could add, room for about 100 new residents, and this is all going to be high quality housing. Spending will be, $16.5 million for construction for the project, which is significant. And we talked about expanding the Liberty Street corridor. So benefits for the city and for the community, 1.1 million in incremental revenue. That's split between property taxes and combined sales tax. Connor, I'm sure, will give his spiel that gets into more of the weeds. That's where these numbers came from. Right now, that would be a permanently expanded tax base. So taking us from where we are today to something that's significantly higher. and we'll get into the numbers, but, we'll cap out at 300,000 a year of, property taxes and then have that number grow. So would be a meaningful addition to the tax basis. We've got direct jobs and indirect jobs during construction, 132 and 32, significant wages, 8.4 million. And the ongoing impact is, permanent jobs of 32, generating 1.5 million in annual wages. And so that's the community job, not just on the site, but also in the neighborhood from just having additional wages and additional economic impact of new residents and businesses. Last point being 2 million in additional new household spending, by having an additional 53 people or 53 residents living here. It's more people who will be shopping, at all the other stores within the city. What I love about these adaptive reuse projects is that, one, they don't displace any city residents. At least this one doesn't, because there's nobody who's living here now anyways. And so we're adding net new housing, and there's not really any additional infrastructure that we'll need because the building's already got the majority of what's needed. There'll be some upgrades, but that's on us. And no additional waste management requirements beyond the current routes that are happening. So limited to no additional city burden. You guys are pretty familiar with the team. There's a lot of names you've seen before. I think Chris Burke should probably have his own office in the corner of this room at this point. But we've done some projects here before. Mid Hudson on the construction side has done projects like this. They're a front runner for us. We actually haven't locked in somebody, but they did a cost study for us that was beneficial, and so that's one group we can go with. ZZ Driggs is a partner in the project and also a tenant at the Shaw Building, and so they have incredible interior design taste, and they're local here, so that's a group we can work with. And Pass Rose on the waterfront, so we did emphasize working with local operators as much as we could. These are some of the other projects we've done, photos from the Foundry, and then some of the other buildings that we have in Newburgh. And yeah, total project cost for this will be about 25 million. We did our best to source as much funding as we could from places that weren't the Newburgh IDA. This is all like on a gradient of like, if we don't get other funding, then we might have to come back here and ask for more to make a project feasible. But in general, between the historic tax credits and the Momentum Fund, we did our best to find as much as we could elsewhere before coming back here. We assumed that we're going to get a Momentum Fund grant, which has not been announced yet, and that will, our tax credit number will be where it is. And we're making a significant investment from our partnership group of $6 million and a lot of time and risk to make something like this happen. And we do it with care, intention, and love to hopefully create a meaningful project for the city. And yeah. So what our ask is here, in order to plug a funding gap, is New York State sales tax exemption, mortgage recording tax exemption, and a pilot request. The breakdown Connor can take you through, but again, we're incrementally creating an additional 700,000 in tax revenue. The general approach that I like to take with pilots is pay the city as much tax as we can. I also have a home here. We have other properties here. We've benefited from the city services in the city of Newburgh. I think a lot of what we've heard is residents who are really upset about how much they have to pay for their own personal home tax, and some of that comes into meetings like this because this is a forum about taxes, and the personal property taxes are high. I think everybody has to pay their fair share, and my intention is to put forth something that has us paying as much as we possibly can and ask for something that's reasonable. To me, that's what makes the numbers actually work here is a 15-year pilot where we're paying a meaningful amount today. $32,000 a year is significant, and we grow that over time to arrive at $300,000. So If we don't do the project, then this building stays paying about $30,000 a year. We have an opportunity to 10x that over a short amount of time, and it would require some investment from the city to help us get there. But yeah, I want to pay as much as we can. As far as timeline goes, we received our planning board approval in December. We received ARC approval in January. So we're well on our way with city approvals. Anticipate closing that out within the next couple weeks. We submitted to you guys in January, and we're pushing to start construction in fall of 2025. And we should be able to hit that. And if, assuming we start then we should be done by winter, spring 2027. Thank you.
Can we ask questions, or do we want to move on to MRB first?
Yeah, I mean, if you have a question.
So two things that came up during our previous public hearing that I think are interesting relative to this. First, this is a rental project, not a for sale project. These aren't
Correct.
condos to sell.
Correct.
And to your comment about wanting to pay as many taxes as possible, again, I think that it was something that was echoed here or questioned, and we have done with, you guys know, with the Foundry project. Would you consider, or the board, this board was not with the previous board, but if the environment, the economic environment changes, and things go gangbusters and it's great and you need less of a pilot, would you be open, or is that something that you guys certainly contemplated with the Foundry of the pilot schedule changing as the economic landscape changes?
Yeah, I think the Foundry was really specific for a couple reasons. It was a really big deviation from what you guys are used to doing. It was condos. It was 100% residential. It was part of an existing HOA group. There was a reverter right on it that the IDA held, and we had literally a gun to our heads from the bankruptcy trustee to sort something out within a very short amount of time. And so we were in a position where I think we were really asking for an above and beyond. We needed a Hail Mary from you guys on that one, and you delivered. And I think in a situation like that, it was, we were basically gonna lose the building, and what we had invested in pursuit costs at that point. And so from a partnership and the investor standpoint, we were able to get on board with something like that. That kind of request is atypical from what I've seen of pilot structures. And so for a much more typical project, like one that's mixed use, commercial, rental, it would be really challenging to actually get people who are not used to investing in projects that have that kind of criteria to then come in and invest in something like, hey, actually, if you do well, or, the economy does well, I think the city of Newburgh will benefit substantially from a good news economic event for the whole city in other ways, and people making more money and people spending more money and more projects happening that maybe don't need pilots at all at that point. I don't know how it'll go, but I think the city will win if the economy's doing well at some point down the line without having to put tough to structure restrictions on this.
And my other question to my first point, did you consider this, and this is something that was brought up by somebody in the audience, we are a city of 70% renters, and there's been sort of a loud outcry, not just in the city of Newburgh, but in other parts of the state. I definitely applaud that you are voluntarily doing an affordable housing component, which I think is important for a lot of reasons. Have you looked at making these condo units or making them potentially for sale units to encourage home ownership in the city and get away from this 70% number?
I mean, I would ask you guys, would you guys support another condo pilot project?
Is that something we are allowed that's under the same auspice as the Foundry?
I think we should have a conversation about that separately at maybe another meeting. The Foundry was unique, as was pointed out. And one of the issues that we looked at for the board at that time is that it is currently not a condominium, because that condominium plan expired by its terms because it was never acted on. If they went to sell units, they would have to file a new prospectus with the Attorney General and then start selling units, which is why the board has put restrictions on their ability to sell units for the first 7 years.
For a timeline.
If they-
after that timeline.
If they sell units during the first 7 years, 84 months, the entire pilot disappears and you can recapture. After the 7-year period, they can start selling units provided they revise the condominium, and the pilot comes off of the individual units that are sold up into a certain percentage, which I think was more than 50%,
Yeah.
but I'm not entirely certain from memory. Once they hit that point in sales, the pilot disappears.
Mhm.
But there's no recapture at that point because they abided by the rules. You also included, to your point earlier, every year they have to tell the agency what the level of rentals is, what the level of rent is for each unit, and determine whether or not that fits within the area for medium household, medium in,
Very medium.
right, AMI. So I think the Foundry, to their point, is very unique. This is not a condo, as I understand it.
Not a condo.
Not a condo. So for the board, if you look at the IDA statute, there is no mention of residential in the statute and was never contemplated. That was a point, that is absolutely correct. Over the last 10 years or so, there has been a movement toward considering residential, provided that there is a study or a need. There's clearly a need for housing in the city of Newburgh. There's clearly a need for low to medium income housing. And what we did on the Foundry and what we would propose to do here is you would have to do what's called a commercial finding resolution in addition to an approving resolution, where essentially it's kind of like if you build it, they will come. The more residents that you have in an area, as was pointed out in the other presentations, people are walking on the streets, they're living here, they need to do things here. They need to shop, they need to have dry cleaners, they need to have the delis, they need to have restaurants, they need to have institutions that they can go visit, and that will lead to a more robust commercial development, preferably, I think, along the Broadway area, which is within walking distance, but also, if these other projects occur, also at the street level of those projects. That's the rationale. The Foundry, just sitting there on its own, there's really no commercial development there. And I think the Foundry was kind of this unique, it needed to be completed. There was a reverter. What was the agency going to do with that? The bankruptcy court was either going to sell it to the group or put it back in the kitty, and who knows what would happen at that point. The first two phases, the homeowners that were there were jumping up and down to have something done. And it certainly is better today than where it was in 2020.
I think I'm just echoing, I've heard from some of this comment and elsewhere that residents are in favor of pilots for the reason that we give pilots, which is to give development an opportunity to get off the ground that it wouldn't otherwise have if it wouldn't come, it didn't have the ability to be here. But that, again, we are not providing economic benefits to quote-unquote boost returns or help. 10, 15 years is a shorter horizon than 20, 30 plus years, but as we've seen, economic changes, certainly within the residential and development community, change rapidly, and it could go the completely opposite way, which we don't want to see. But if everything goes fabulous, gangbusters, sunny side up, and for some reason rents are much larger, does the pilot then become 7, 8, 10 years in, become just in excess of developer profit or developer return because the project is so beneficial, or is it still needed? And I think that that's what residents who are concerned about their taxes want to know. Okay, fine, you want to give a 5-year pilot, a 10-year pilot, a 15-year pilot. How do you know what's going to happen at that time in the future? And are they still going to need this benefit? Do they still need these extra incentives? So that's something that I've heard around, and
So I think that's a great issue that the board should be able to discuss and contemplate and think about before the approving. We're not out approving, but I think that's the right issue to discuss. I think there's a difference with due respect to Philippe's project and this project. I think there's a difference between those projects
they're very different.
and the project that's being proposed at 50-72 Liberty. By way of size and scope, they all provide direct and indirect jobs, as MLB has pointed out. They all provide direct and indirect construction jobs, which are important. The 50-72 is under a different program, I believe, than the others. Are you getting any state grants?
We applied for the Momentum Fund grant,
Okay.
and those grants typically, if you win, are scaled to the size of the project.
Right.
So,
But I think the 50-72 is more consistent with the governor's proposal of these types of projects by its sheer size, as opposed to your size and certainly Philippe's size. So I think
They're
I
very
think
different.
that type of project, from my experience, doesn't get done without a pilot. These, they would have to say whether or not they get done without a pilot. But I don't think the state program encourages pilots.
Yeah, separate project.
Correct.
Yeah, and, I would just say too, just to reference back to some of the comments that were made during the public hearing, of course, wanted the commenters to be able to get their comments onto the record without going back and forth, because I don't think that's the purpose of the public hearing. But I think there is a real base misconception about how municipal government works, period, and where revenues come from to provide services. So I think it's just worth putting on the record here. The taxes are the levy, right? The levy gets adopted every year. Assessments are how the levy gets spread over the taxpayers. So increases in tax revenues, if the levy remains the same, actually reduces the tax burden across the populace. If sales tax revenues are increased, that is revenue coming into the city that does not have to be got through the property tax levy, right? So that also allows the city to hold down property taxes. So I think any revenue that is generated is incredibly beneficial to the taxpayers. It is the levy always. So if the city does not raise the tax levy, any revenue that is generated through property taxes is a benefit to the taxpayers, because it reduces the overall tax burden and spreads it more equitably among the residents. And that is true whether you own a home or you're renting, because everybody pays property taxes here in the city. So not directly addressing anybody, but just putting that into the record. Generating economic activity in the city is objectively beneficial to every property taxpayer in the city. And as long as the city is holding the tax levy in place, which it can do if it's generating revenue from other sources, including sales tax revenue, which incidentally is received through a shared agreement countywide, right? So some of the comments made during the public hearing that, well, are these sales taxes generated within the city? That is largely irrelevant to the city's revenue gained from the sales tax. The sales tax revenue is aggregated countywide and then distributed to municipalities under a funding formula that is entered into by all municipalities. So just wanted to put that on the record. It is objectively beneficial to every property taxpayer in the city, whether they own or rent, to generate economic activity both in the city and countywide.
Can I just, I'm sorry, just to
Sure.
one comment to that, and actually I'm gonna ask Connor, because we've approached this as a board before, and actually as a previous board had approved a resolution to ask MRB to do an analysis of this, but it has been said and sort of widely, I guess, known or reported within economic development that there are many tiers of net fiscal impact. So residential projects, whether they be market rate or affordable, can often be net neutral, can often be net negative in terms of, yes, they are paying positive taxes, but the impacts, the amount of services and public funds that they require make the net, make essentially the profit of the taxes that goes into the city coffers much less. Residential uses the most amount of impacts. Part of the reason IDAs were created is because commercial taxes are much more valuable or much richer to the city coffers because they pay a much larger amount of taxes versus the impacts that they use, leaving a much larger net positive benefit to the city. So part of the reason IDAs were incentivized to create commercial businesses is to help the city coffers to be able to pay with that additional discretional net positive tax values for the sidewalks, for the parks, for city initiatives, city things that it already has in the books. So I agree with you that positive taxes, just in general, are great, and creating economic development has a lot of multiplier effects. I think with this board, we are really charged with, and as Bob had mentioned, really charged with creating net positive tax rateables for the benefit of the flip side for the city, for creating those positive dollars into the tax coffers. So again, this is like ancillary. I think the project is gorgeous, and I'm very, very excited. I think that it is a really great activation of the area. I think as a board, we need to talk about which is separate, and we've gotten into here, but how we are attracting and continuing to make sure we're following, those very valuable commercial tax rates.
I kind of echo.
I echo that a lot. I would love to see if we're able to do these net analyses. It's my understanding that that's actually changed significantly, especially with severely declining enrollment in all of our schools. It was largely based on schools, and safe, new, and secure housing actually uses tremendously less services than the existing housing in our communities. So I would love to see. It would be great to see the actual numbers, to see if there is something in here with any of these projects. So if that's an opportunity going forward in these projects, or again going forward, because we do seem to be seeing more and more residential projects. So something to consider for MRB.
Yeah, I would add a thought too, just while we're all talking about things. I think Newburgh has a handful of challenges, and I think that there's an expectation, or it's hard to see when there's an expectation of one specific site to solve all of the challenges the city of Newburgh of, like, if we're doing rental, then why aren't we doing condo? If we're doing market, why aren't we doing affordable? you can't have every site solve all the problems. What we got to focus on is the bigger picture of how are we weaving together a tapestry of thoughtful developments and encouraging momentum amongst the development community from people who actually feel like attached and connected to what's happening here. And like, how do we think about things big picture to create a great business ecosystem, and then also have people come and execute and think about things like one project and one step at a time. And so a project like this solves a handful of challenges for this specific corner and has been established thoughtfully to help address as much as it can from one lens. And then some other things get left on the table. It's not perfect, but it was definitely thoughtful. And I had another thought, but it left me. It's a good one.
To your point, and sorry not to belabor, but since we do have our economic development director here, this was something that we used to discuss a lot as an IDA board. That bigger picture, and to collaborate with the other boards, so that our job is to incentivize developers to come and obviously to take advantage of these to create businesses that wouldn't otherwise be here. It would be great if we could have a consortium of boards and come to certain district or certain areas where the ARC, where the planning board, where the zoning board, where IDA could say, listen, this is what we want to see, and these are the benefits that each of these boards, these are the terms, these are the benefits, and this would be a great incentive to create economic development down this corridor, or to furtherance of that fabric, so that there's a concerted effort instead of kind of just spaghetti at the wall.
Totally. I mean, this is really nice spaghetti. I made it the nicest
It's
spaghetti.
beautiful spaghetti.
I think it's cannelloni, actually. And Bob, just to your point of like, well, smaller projects like this, in your opinion, might not need economic incentives.
That's not an opinion, it was just a statement.
And so not to misconstrue, but I think that my thought on that is really like, well, then where are they, and why haven't they been getting developed in the city of Newburgh? Like, developers are smart and enterprising, some of them. There definitely are smart and enterprising developers throughout the region. From different regions, people seek and seek out good opportunities. There was great economic opportunities here. You've seen it time and time again in other places. People jump on them, and they don't need to come and waste their time and other people's time to, make cases for things that they don't need. And when other developers would swoop in and just get it done more quickly, pay more money, and we'd have, we wouldn't have the vacant sites and the buildings in disrepair that we do. So I think the landscape speaks for itself.
My only point was that the 5072, again, from my understanding, fits within the state program of affordable housing as proposed by the governor, because of the number of units and the commercial aspect as well. Philippe's project is significantly smaller than that. Your project is smaller than that. And I'm not sure that those
Definitely
two
bigger than Philippe.
huh?
Bigger than Philippe's project.
concur, but I'm not sure that either one fits within the state-sponsored program. That was my only point.
I actually have a quick follow-up for that. Could you just explain a little more the 8 units? So you will just hold them, you said you weren't going to tie them to any program. So
There's no program to tie them.
Understood. So you just manage it, so Manatree or your management company will just internally, sorry, I'm just trying to get
Yeah, no, it's a good question,
And then
and
if you
it's
have a thought,
actually,
the second part would be, you have a thought on the duration of that, so.
This
for
was,
X amount of time.
the Momentum Fund is coming up with some kind of structure for the projects that do fall out of all the other existing structures. And so, assuming that that's a favorable outcome, I will understand that better from their purview, because I think they're creating something that doesn't exist yet, and that was part of why it took so long last round to announce. It's because they're like, wait a minute, these aren't part of a thing. How do we uphold some accountability here? So more on that. It might already be announced for the last round, but I just don't know yet.
Helpful, thank you.
Thank you.
Are you already entertaining tenants for your anchors, the restaurant and the gym?
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah, we've talked to Promises Kept, and I know probably everybody wants to work with them because they're great and they're cool and their food's good, and I think they do an elevated experience, and like they just got started with Downstate, so we're in conversation with them, and yeah, and then there's, yeah, so that's the main lead.
Great. Connor, do you want to share?
Thank you.
All right, so I might sound like a little bit of a broken record here, but just kind of wanted to give a quick high-level overview of our findings for this Shaw Building project. We'll start with the test of reasonableness. Again, we go back to those our two core questions at the heart of this study. You know, is the incentive necessary for the deal to be successful? In other words, without the abatement, will the project happen? And then, is the proposed abatement too generous? So we go back to our more traditional framework here of analyzing the debt service coverage ratio, and then looking at the return in the developer's projections. So again, these are some of the benchmarks that we look at compared to our understanding of similar developments, interest rates, capitalization rates, debt service coverage ratios, and equity dividend rates. Our benchmark data provides a range for each of these values, and we're basically assessing if the developer's projections are within these ranges here for these values. We also looked at rental prices for residential units, income restricted residential units. We looked at the represented rental rates for the commercial tenants and see if they matched our understanding of this market and similar developments. And we looked at their operating expenses, escalation factors, and then some of the other costs represented in the construction budget. So for this project, in terms of the return to the developer, the equity dividend rate is what we look at, ranged from 6.5% to around 14%, with an average of 10%. And the return that we modeled and checked with the developer's projections fell within that range. So in other words, we determined that the applicants requested assistance as represented in their pro forma modeling provides a reasonable risk-adjusted return to the developer, and also the project would meet some adequate minimums for the debt service coverage ratio for their financing. So in terms of the cost-benefit analysis, as Jake pointed out, it's a $16.5 million of spending within the county on local materials and local labor. So that translates to a total of 164 jobs over the construction period and $8.4 million in wages. The ongoing jobs, which are assessed at the city level, again, are driven by the resident spending as well as the employment of the commercial portions of this project. Together account for 32 jobs on an annual basis, earning $1.4 million in wages, again, in the city. So we have our pilot schedule. The requested pilot abatement is a total of 15 years. It will generate $1.2 million in property tax revenue, which is about $684,000 more than what the site would generate, in its current form. This project is a little bit unique in that it has two components, right? An existing structure and a new structure to be built on the site. So when we talk about the cost of the abatement, where typically we compare the the amount of pilot payments to what the property would pay under their full assessment. It's a little bit different scenario in this case because the existing structure, the Shaw building, actually qualifies for an RP 485 as of right abatement. So instead of comparing the pilot payments to the full taxes, we are comparing the pilot payments to a scenario where the project would qualify for this as of right abatement, at least the existing portion, and then the new construction would be taxed at its full assessment. So if you see our, in our full breakout in our report, why it looks a little bit different, that is why. So our cost of the pilot abatement is 2.5 million over 15 years.
And that's versus the 485.
Correct. So it's 2.5 is the versus the 485p plus the full assessment on the new construction. So here's kind of the breakout, fiscal benefits and exemptions. So again, the increase in property tax revenue is about 684,000 over 15 years. In addition to the pilot exemption, the applicant is also seeking a sales tax exemption and a mortgage recording tax exemption. So we have those values there. And then our final sort of cumulative impact on this table to the right, benefits to cost ratio of 11.85, and then the tax benefits to tax cost ratio of 0.42 for this project. So that's it for this one. Any questions on our report?
I just have one question.
Sure.
The Momentum Fund, you haven't you haven't received it yet, right?
Correct.
So the plug that you have in there, like what happens to the benefit report if that changes?
So
We
this,
assumed that we were gonna get it for the sake of doing the numbers
Yeah.
and because optimism and manifesting is real.
Yep, sorry.
And then, so if we don't get it, then I guess we would have to come back and
Revise.
make a different ask.
exactly.
So,
Any other questions? Great.
thank you. Can I ask Bob, how does that work in terms of, did you hold a public hearing? What, do you know when you'll hear?
I wish.
I mean, would we go as far as a public hearing and approving resolution and then wait to hear what that number is, or what happens if that changes?
I don't think we can do an approving resolution until they can represent that they can actually build the project. And until if that's a critical piece to their project, I would recommend that we withhold the approving piece, can go forward with the public hearing. And then as they proceed, if something changes, we may have to have another public hearing.
Yeah, I think that there's a kind of like a chicken and egg issue amongst these various programs of everybody wants to know the same thing, that everyone else has committed first. And that's a challenge because that's impossible to happen. And so it's actually critical for the Momentum Fund to see a shovel-ready project that is ready to get constructed, which includes having a pilot in place. And so it will actually really help the project and is critical to have a pilot as part of, the sooner we can tell them that we've advanced that as far as we can, the better chance the city of Newburgh has, this project has, of getting some state money, which then puts less burden on the need for a heavier pilot. And so it would be extraordinarily beneficial if we could move the process through. And if for some reason we didn't get it, then we could address that at that time.
I mean, the agency could always consider an approving resolution subject to a representation as to being able to build and finance. And so you would just have a placeholder, which you did do for a project at 191, where you did proceed with it approving subject to their ability to get the financing. That developer represented that without that approving resolution, they could not possibly get financing. And they haven't come back, so I'm not sure if that was accurate or not.
I'll just add, I think there's full understanding that it'll be a matter of days, but probably before the public hearing, and certainly before, if the vote was to happen at the subsequent meeting after that, certainly before that, we would know one way or the other. Yes,
It's not like a few months
correct,
out.
yes.
Oh, okay.
Great news.
Yeah, that is good news.
He's smiling now.
All right, if there's no further questions, I'll entertain a motion on resolution number 2025-01-22-02, consideration of a public hearing for the Shaw Building LP.
I so move.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Roll call on the,
Mike Napoli,
aye.
Ally Church,
Yes.
Viviana is absent, Gregory Hato,
Yes.
Christina Amato,
Yes.
and Sharonda Paul.
Yes.
Great. Resolution number 2025-01-22-03, amendment to authorizing resolution for cell tower lease extension.
So I'll take this one. Back in September, there was, just by background, I think we touched on it at one meeting. There's a cell tower somewhere in the city where the city leases to the agency for 30 years this plot of land on which this agency was obligated to build a cell tower, and did. That cell tower was constructed by a company that's now known as Crown Castle. They provide free tower access to city services, presumably fire, police, EMT, perhaps other services, as well as leasing it out to commercial companies for use for cell service. The agency receives monthly income from that use of the cell service. While the city lease to the agency is 30 years, the lease to that company was 25 and expired in September of 24. The company proposed an extension for 50 years with a payment of $20,000. The agency approves a resolution in September that allowed for a 20-year with the ability to cancel on a 30 days notice, a 60 days notice, and the payment of 20 years. What we have negotiated is essentially a 25-year extension for a payment of $20,000. They wanted to have it as five-year terms, but it would be cancelable on 30 months' notice before the end of the third term. So before the 15 years, first 15 years would expire, and then before the next 5-year, again, 30 years, 30 months notice. That would allow them to find other space and negotiate other leases in somewhere in the city, presumably. They would also then pay the $20,000. So this amendment is this resolution amends the September resolution to allow for those terms to be implemented and a lease then to be signed.
So they're gonna tell us 2.5 years and
You're going to tell
5 year.
them.
Huh?
You have the ability to tell them. If you don't cancel, if the agency or its successor.
So these aren't option renewals, this is us telling them after every 5 years.
Correct.
And we have to notice them 2.5 years prior, or they have to notice us?
The agency or its successor notice them, we want you out, we're gonna use the tower for something else, or that land for something else.
Who came up with the 2.5 year notice?
That was their request, to allow them time to find other space.
Kind of strange.
30 months. 30 months.
I mean, generally in commercial leases, when there's notice.
I understand. I'm not arguing that point. This is the terms that they've requested.
So we would have to notice them halfway through their 5-year term if we didn't want them.
Their third 5-year term, and then their fourth 5-year term. That you do not want them there any longer.
Was there any talk about, so the maintenance of the tower itself is entirely on them?
Correct.
And then the other question is the maintenance of the access road leading to it. Was there any discussion of that?
That, I'm not aware is part of the lease.
Is that something the city currently does?
No. So,
So they must be doing it, or no?
I don't think anyone does, is my concern. It's a,
I think there's a gate with locks on
I
it.
understand the access, but it's not maintained. So if that, my question is that something either the IDA or the city or the lessee over time, I believe repairs would need to be made during this term. In the next 5 years, I don't know. In the next 10 years, I don't know. But this is a long term, so would be curious to know about that and
So
what the IDA's like.
we were not aware of that as an issue. So thanks for raising that. That's great. Yeah. The 20,000 could certainly be used to that, but I don't know why we don't hoist that obligation onto them, which would make more sense.
Can we go back to them?
Absolutely.
With this point, and certainly the 2.5 year point?
Yeah,
I don't
just
think
the
that
maintenance of
benefits-
the road, if maintenance of the road, during this very long term comes up, it would be on that.
Absolutely.
I think we should pick also a standard term for notification of not 30 months.
This was what
I understand what they proposed.
they rejected. The agency rejected the 50 years, and rightly so, because that's kind of crazy. They rejected what was approved in September. So
I would suggest, do you guys have a suggestion for the number of months, but I would not say.
Yeah, please.
I would say, generally it's 3 months, 6 months, I guess, if we need, but
I would even be comfortable with a year, because at least
I
it would
think
be a
a year.
board
I think a year
that had
makes more sense.
tenure that could think about something. The issue with that term is that, the board turns over and, who is there, are they still here remembering? Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I'll report back next month.
so we're tabling this resolution?
I think so.
Do you want a motion for that? Do you need a motion?
All right, and we have resolution number 2025-01-22-04, authorization of the agency to enter into a settlement stipulation.
So this is in connection with the Omri litigation. It authorizes the chair or the vice chair to execute a stipulation of discontinuance and a release to M&T. As I understand it, you'll get one back from M&T as well, and to implement whatever else is necessary, and authorizing the payment of the settlement amount of $350,000.
If I read this correctly, this is also only for the Armory building, does not include the DMV building, so they continue to hold a lien against the DMV building.
Correct. Part of the documents that were provided is to split the judgment and to vacate the mortgage on this property only.
Who owns the DMV building? The state?
No, it's
No.
leased. It was Carchetta, and I don't know though if.
Oh, that's okay, I just wasn't
Yeah,
sure.
it's private, it's privately owned, and then, similar to the county rents it.
And the documents were prepared by Kelly and the attorney for M&T.
And, again, I just want to thank everybody involved. I know this was a long road. I'm going to thank the board for authorizing settlement authority of up to $500,000 to bring this matter to a close. Fortunately, we were able to reach settlement for $350,000. It's a great deal all around to vest the IDA with fee simple title to the property and explore additional options free of encumbrances for the future of that property.
I don't know if this is confidential, but we had offered that many months ago. Do you know why there was a change in heart? Is that something we're allowed to discuss?
I could not speculate on what their change of heart might have been. Other than I would say we had very competent representation from Kelly Pressler, our outside counsel, our special counsel on the matter, from Mr. McLaughlin, and Cher's work on this matter.
My recollection is they were asked by our attorneys to provide certain proof that the judge had suggested, and they, when not able to show how they had gotten to a certain number, all of a sudden this number seemed to come up faster. So that's from my end on being on a couple calls. That's what it seems.
I can speculate where the number came from, but it's pure speculation.
Okay. Thank you.
Competent work all around. I have a motion to approve resolution number 2025-01-22-04, authorization of the agency to enter into a settlement stipulation.
I'll make that motion, but I do think that some of our longer members who dealt with this much more may want to be on the record for it, but I'll make it. No one else.
I'll make the motion. I understand. Yes,
It's yours to win, so.
This has been a very, very long-term project, and I think that there's still more to come with this, but I'm happy that, as was mentioned, we are getting this off of our legal plate. Cool. You want a second?
I'll second.
Roll call.
Mike Nepple,
Aye.
Ali Church.
Yes.
Deanna is absent. Craig Renato,
Yes.
Christina Amato,
Yes.
and Shonda Powell.
Yes.
Great. We can move to item 11, old business. Is there any old business?
I'd like to bring up one thing about the website. I know that there's a lot of confusion about the new website. The new website was a tool for us to just convey information about what we can provide a possible project. I know that people are happening upon it and trying to get other information, and I think that we need to clarify that. The bulk of our postings happens on the city website. We didn't want to overstep that. It was just sort of like a brochure or a tool to say like, hey, go to our website, see the programs we offer in a clear, concise way. So I just wanted to clarify that, okay?
That's very helpful.
Old business.
Okay, great. All right, thanks. All right. If there's no other old business, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Don't take that one.
All right, second. All right, all in
Shonda,
favor?
second.
Aye.